You can't be serious about that, can you?
I'm very serious about it.
I'll give him credit for that because there's a lot of the bravery for running away when he got tired.
No, the bravery.
Sorry.
No, go on.
Sorry. From round one, running away, jumping up and down, falling down on the floor. Yeah.
The moment that punch landed, the room didn't just go quiet, it froze. Because when Stephen A. Smith confronts Jake Paul live after a knockout loss to Anthony Joshua, you're not watching an interview anymore. You're watching a public reckoning. This wasn't sympathy hour. This wasn't damage control. This was pressure applied in HD with no commercial break to hide behind. And the tension, thick enough to stop a jab mid-dash air. Because Stephen A. didn't come to coddle. He came with questions sharpened like elbows, legacy, reality, and whether hype survives when gravity finally collects its debt. And Jake Paul, sitting there, trying to keep composure while the internet replayed the knockout like a broken alarm clock. This made the Kardashians look like they're arguing over lighting angles. This was raw. This was awkward. This was the kind of TV moment that feels like a secret just slipped through the cracks, unscripted, uncomfortable, and impossible to look away from. So what really happened in that exchange? Was this the end of a narrative or the beginning of a reinvention? And when the smoke cleared, who walked away exposed the fighter, the brand, or the myth? Yeah, this wasn't a loss. It was a collision. The knockout didn't just end a fight. It detonated a storyline. One moment, Jake Paul was still standing inside a narrative he helped build brick by brick. The next, he was on the canvas, staring up at the ceiling, while reality clocked in for overtime. That's when the real pressure started, not from fists, but from questions. Because this loss wasn't quiet. It wasn't debatable. It wasn't something you could edit into a highlight reel with motivational music. Anthony Joshua didn't just win, he erased doubt with authority, and the timing made it worse. This happened after years of marketing, bravado, and controlled opponents. Years of telling the world boxing was bending to a new era. One heavyweight punch later, the era asked for its credentials back. Enter Stephen A. Smith. Not as a cheerleader. Not as a hater. But as the voice that shows up when the fantasy meets the invoice. And he didn't waste a second pretending this was just another loss. The interview atmosphere shifted immediately. This wasn't a friendly sit-down. This felt like an intervention broadcast to millions. Stephen A.'s tone wasn't angry, it was surgical. He didn't ask how Jake felt. He asked what this meant. For the sport, for the brand. For the idea that hype could outrun experience forever, Jake Paul tried to stay composed. You could see it. The controlled breathing, the measured pauses, the practiced calm. But composure only works when the questions allow you to hide. These didn't. The knockout replayed in everyone's head while Stephen A. talked. That's the cruel part of live TV. Silence lets memory speak. Every pause echoed with the same image. Power meeting preparation, and preparation winning. Stephen oppressed where it hurt most. Legacy, credibility. Whether Jake was chasing greatness or just chasing cameras, and the room felt smaller with every word. This wasn't trash talk. This was accountability disguised as conversation. The kind that forces you to answer yourself before answering the audience. And Jake knew it. Because this loss wasn't against a fellow influencer. This wasn't a novelty bout. This was a real heavyweight with real consequences on a real stage. There's no remixing that. The internet reacted instantly, but Stephen A. didn't wait for memes. He went straight for the uncomfortable truth. Boxing doesn't care about algorithms. Views don't block punches. And confidence doesn't count as defense. Jake tried to frame it as a learning moment. A step in the journey. A test he volunteered for. But Stephen A. wasn't letting that narrative breathe yet. He questioned the jump. The matchmaking, the timeline. whether ambition had finally outrun patience, and that's when the tension thickened. Because ambition is Jake Paul's entire brand, questioning it is like pulling the thread on everything else. Sponsors, fans, and future fights all hang from it. This wasn't just about losing a match. It was about losing control of the story. For the first time, Jake wasn't narrating his own arc. He was reacting to someone else defining it. Stephen A. didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The silence between questions did the damage. Live TV has a way of exposing cracks you can't edit out. Jake answered carefully. But careful answers don't always land as confident ones. Sometimes they sound like survival. And survival is a different energy than dominance. Viewers felt that shift instantly. The interview became a mirror. One side reflecting hard-earned credibility. The other reflecting potential suddenly under review. And neither could look away. This is where the scandal aspect kicked in. Not scandal-like controversy, but scandal-like exposure. The kind where illusions don't collapse loudly. They dissolve on camera. Slow, uncomfortable. Permanent. Fans watching weren't divided anymore. They were recalibrating. Rewriting expectations. Reassessing what they'd bought into, because hype is easy when you're winning. It's fragile when you're humbled. And Stephen A. made sure that humility had a microphone. Front and center, by the time the segment ended, something was clear. This wasn't a post-fight interview. It was a pivot point. And whatever came next wouldn't be controlled the same way. The knockout may have happened in the ring. But the real confrontation happened right there, under lights, with nowhere to hide, and that was just the beginning. The moment the interview clip hit social media, the fight itself became secondary. Nobody was talking about footwork or combinations anymore. They were replaying Stephen A.'s tone, pausing Jake's reactions, and arguing over who looked more uncomfortable. The knockout had ended the match. But the interview reopened the wound in public. Memes moved faster than official highlights. Screenshots of Jake mid-blink turned into instant reaction images. Stephen A.'s facial expressions were captioned like a disappointed professor grading a final exam. It felt less like sports commentary and more like the internet hosting a roast with no RSVP list. Celebrities didn't need to name names to weigh in. Vague tweets about reality checks and levels to this flooded timelines. Fans treated every motivational quote like it was secretly about Jake. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion on when confidence becomes delusion. The pop culture comparisons went nuclear. People compared the moment to a reality show reunion where receipts finally hit the table. Others called it the sports version of a viral cancellation arc, minus the apology notes app screenshot. It was messy, theatrical, and impossible to scroll past. What escalated things was how divided the audience became. One side praised Stephen A. for saying what nobody else would say to Jake's face. The other accused him of kicking someone while they were down for ratings. Both sides argued like the interview personally affected their Wi-Fi connection. Jake's defenders worked overtime. They reframed the loss as bravery, growth, and ambition all rolled into one. They argued that stepping into the ring with a heavyweight took more courage than critics admitted. But courage doesn't trend as well as embarrassment when the clip keeps looping. The critics sharpened their knives. They questioned the matchmaking, the speed of the climb, and the bubble Jake lived in. To them, the interview was overdue, not cruel. It was the moment hype finally met consequences under studio lights. Stephen A.'s delivery became the real headline. He wasn't yelling, ranting, or showboating. He spoke like someone explaining gravity to a person who thought jumping was optional. That calm intensity made the confrontation feel heavier than a shouting match ever could. Reaction videos multiplied overnight. Everyone with a microphone suddenly became a boxing philosopher. Some praised the honesty, others accused Stephen A. of bias, but nobody ignored it. Ignoring it would have meant admitting the moment landed exactly as intended. Jake's body language became a case study. People analyzed his pauses like they were decoding a foreign language. Confidence was debated frame by frame, as if certainty could be measured in seconds of silence. The internet turned human reaction into a forensic science experiment. This is where the narrative twisted. The fight stopped being about losing to Anthony Joshua. It became about whether Jake Paul's entire boxing experiment had reached its expiration date. That question carried more weight than any punch thrown that night. Sponsors and brand watchers quietly took notes. No announcements were made, but attention shifted. Public perception doesn't need a press release to change direction. It just needs enough people asking the same uncomfortable question. The sarcasm got louder as discomfort spread. Comments joked that boxing had finally verified Jake's account. Others said the interview felt like a pop quiz he forgot to study for. Humor kept the conversation alive while cutting deeper with every share. The sports world leaned in harder than expected. This wasn't just influencer boxing chatter anymore. Traditional fans saw the interview as validation of everything they'd said for years. New fans saw it as a turning point instead of an ending. Stephen A's presence reframed the loss as cultural, not just athletic. This wasn't one fighter losing to another. This was spectacle meeting tradition, and tradition reminding spectacle it still runs the room. That subtext made the moment bigger than either man. Jake's future plans immediately became debate fuel. People speculated about rematches, step-down fights, and image repairs. Every hypothetical sounded heavier now because the myth had cracked. Once the illusion breaks, rebuilding takes twice the effort. The outrage didn't burn out quickly. It simmered, matured, and spread into long-form discussions. Podcasts, panels, and comment threads dissected the interview like a cultural event. This wasn't a viral clip anymore. It was a reference point. Fans who once defended every move hesitated. Not because they disappeared, but because certainty had faded. The interview planted doubt where loyalty used to sit comfortably. And doubt is far more dangerous than criticism. What made this phase brutal was repetition. The clip kept resurfacing, stripped of context, and reposted with new captions. Each repost reintroduced the discomfort to a fresh audience. The moment refused to stay in the past. By the end of this wave, the conversation had fully shifted. Nobody was asking if Stephen A went too far anymore. They were asking whether he said what needed to be said. And that question doesn't come with an easy answer. The knockout shook the ring. The interview shook the narrative. And together, they turned a single loss into a full-blown reckoning. The kind that doesn't fade quietly once the memes slow down. Because now the spotlight wasn't just on Jake's chin. It was on his future. And the pressure was only getting heavier. Once the noise settled, the consequences didn't arrive with fireworks. They crept in quietly. This wasn't a scandal that burned hot and disappeared. It was a recalibration moment, the kind that subtly changes how every future move gets interpreted. And those are the moments that hurt brands more than losses. Jake Paul woke up in a different reality after that interview. Not because he lost fighters lose all the time, but because he lost control of the narrative. For the first time, he wasn't the loudest voice explaining what just happened. The knockout had already humbled the body. The interview humbled the story. That's a far more difficult recovery because muscles heal faster than credibility. And credibility, once questioned publicly, demands receipts to return. The boxing world didn't rush to celebrate his downfall. Instead, it leaned back and waited. Waiting is worse than mockery because it signals evaluation. Jake was no longer entertainment. He was a case study. Fans noticed the shift immediately. Support didn't vanish, but it changed texture. It became conditional, cautious, quieter. Loyalty stopped being automatic and started asking questions. That's when reality sets in. When applause turns into silence, and silence turns into scrutiny. Every future matchup suddenly needed justification. Every announcement needed substance, not slogans. The loss to Anthony Joshua stopped being framed as bravery and started being framed as timing. Was it too much, too fast, too soon? That question followed Jake everywhere, even when it wasn't asked out loud. Because once doubt enters, it doesn't need permission to stay. Stephen A's words continued to echo. Not because he repeated them, but because the industry did. Analysts, commentators, and fans borrowed his framing. They didn't quote him, they adopted his perspective. That's when you know a moment landed. Jake's public appearances felt different afterward. More measured, more cautious, like someone who realized confidence needs backup once it gets tested. This wasn't a collapse, it was an exposure. Exposure doesn't destroy you instantly. It forces you to choose what stays and what goes. And that choice defines the next chapter. Sponsors didn't panic, but they watched closely. Brands don't react emotionally. They react strategically. They don't ask if someone lost, they ask what the loss means. And meaning was still under review. The influencer boxing conversation shifted as well. This fight didn't end it, but it complicated it. People started asking where spectacle ends and responsibility begins. That's not a fun question, but it's an important one. Jake's critics felt validated. But validation doesn't equal resolution. They wanted follow-through, not victory laps. They wanted to see if he would adjust or double down. Because stubbornness looks different after a public reckoning. Jake's supporters reframed hope around growth instead of dominance. That's a quieter kind of fandom. Less chest beating, more patience. It suggested even believers felt the ground shift. The aftermath also changed how losses are discussed in this space. This wasn't laughed off as a learning curve. It was analyzed as a turning point. And turning points don't come with guarantees. The biggest consequence was psychological, not fear awareness. Jake now knew the ceiling wasn't theoretical. It had a name, a face, and a highlight reel. Stephen A didn't need to say another word. His role in the moment was complete. He wasn't there to destroy Jake. He was there to measure him. And measurement is unforgiving. The interview became a reference point for future conversations. Whenever Jake's name came up, so did that moment. Not the knockout alone, the confrontation. The questions that didn't get easy answers. That's how narratives evolve. Not with endings, but with anchors. Moments you can't skip past when telling the story again. This became one of those moments. Jake still had options. Rematches, rebrands, reinvention has always been part of his playbook. But reinvention after exposure requires humility, not volume. It requires patience, not provocation. And patience has never been the algorithm's favorite currency. That tension will define what happens next. The public wasn't rooting for failure anymore. They were watching for response. Response to adversity separates entertainers from contenders. And this was the first real adversity he couldn't talk his way around. The silence after the interview mattered more than the interview itself. No immediate clapbacks. No overcorrections. Just space and Space Force's reflection. This wasn't the end of Jake Paul's boxing journey. But it was the end of invincibility. And invincibility, once lost, never comes back the same way. It has to be replaced with something sturdier. What comes next will matter more than what just happened. Not because people forgot the loss, they didn't, but because recovery reveals character. And character survives longer than hype. The knockout changed the fight. The interview changed the perception. And perception is the hardest opponent of all. And if you're still here, don't lie to yourself. You felt that shift too. This wasn't just a knockout. This wasn't just a tough interview. This was the moment hype ran into hard questions and didn't get to dodge them. So go ahead and smash that like button like it owes you money and tried to ghost you. Because every like tells the algorithm you want moments that actually matter, not highlight clips with a filter slapped on them. Drop a comment and keep it real. Did Stephen A. say what needed to be said? Or did he hit Jake when the gloves were already off? Subscribe if you're tired of pretend outrage and soft takes that protect narratives instead of challenging them. Here, we don't panic when the hype cracks. We zoom in. Because pressure doesn't ruin stories, it reveals them. Turn on notifications, because stories like this don't end when the cameras cut. They evolve in silence. They resurface in decisions, rematches, and moments where confidence either backs itself up or folds completely. And you don't want to catch that chapter late. Remember this moment. Anyone can talk big while winning. Anyone can trend while protected. But when the loss is public and the questions are live, character has nowhere to hide. This wasn't about hate. It was about accountability. It was about whether ambition can survive reality without shortcuts. And whether reinvention is louder than excuses. Stay locked in. Stay observant. Stay skeptical. Because the next move will tell us more than any interview ever could. This is Punch Press, where the punches don't stop at the ring, and the truth always comes with impact. Truth always comes with impact.